that I gave them to you. And it's just a random order. Yeah. It's very unlikely that they would be able to give you the list of the fruits or the order that you gave them in. However, if you ask them to give you a list of fruit in any order they want, and then to repeat that back to you in 10 minutes time, it's much more likely they're going to get 10 out of 10. So, you know, it's right that, you know, people actually learn through experience and not by being told what to do, because they just forget it. It's just something else for them to forget.
Absolutely.
So that's my view on it, really.
Yeah, thanks, Guy. It's really important. I'm just going to repeat it because Facebook Live cut out. So I was trying, that's why I was looking really puzzled. But what you were saying was, you, in your opinion, you think people only remember about 30% of what we say. Totally agree with that. I think everybody else would agree with it. And I think it's one of those substantial things. It just is. Thanks, Di. I also want to call on one of the Fab Five. So Neil, just want to hear your thoughts before everybody goes next. And I know Phil wanted to say something. I think it's Phil.
Okay, so my thoughts at the minute is just building on from what Kev said as well. Sometimes there could be a third party in it, not just the two parties, because they could have strong influence off a parent or a partner that could also be making that difference as well.
Yeah.
So I think at the minute there could be that third party influence. I like what Di just mentioned about the list of fruits. That was a physical test in the fire service. That was to remember 10 different items after walking through with breathing apparatus, and it was quite difficult. So it's you probably do only get 30%. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, Neil, could you elaborate on that? Because the Facebook Live feed did cut out. So if you could just repeat it, just briefly.
What about the third influence?
No, the what Di was saying, and just connect it with your 10 items.
All right. So Di was mentioning that there a list of 5 fruits, and then 10 minutes later repeat what the 5 fruits were.
Yeah.
In the fire service, you sent through a burning or smoke-filled house set up, and at the end of it, there's 10 objects. After doing some more hose running and that, you've got to repeat back them 10 objects. So you've got to remember it as well. And it's quite a difficult thing to do, to be quite honest. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
Brilliant. I'm going to go to Terry first, just his thoughts on what the topic is about. And he's saying no, he's doing gestures to me. I wanted to. Phil was next, I believe, and then Lee. That's just the order I saw it in. Phil.
Yeah, sort of thinking about the title of the topic, listen to me and do as I say. I think we need, this is where your rapport and so on comes in. The pupil has to want to listen to what you've got to say. If they're not engaged with you, then they're not going to listen. If you have their trust and they've got faith in you, they will actually listen to what you've got to say. And as long as you don't wrap it on for too long. So, you know, sometimes you can see you're actually losing them, and this goes back to learning styles. But as I say, they need to want to listen to you. And that's where I think coaching comes in, rather than just the old instructing style where you just go bang, 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 bang. So I won't wrap it on.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks, Phil. Rabbiting on. Kind of what I do. I think I used to get paid to talk. Don't know what's going on with that. Lee.
I just wanted to go back to what Sammy said about robots, and possibly in an ideal world we would be robots, but we're human beings. We weren't designed to drive cars, really. Nothing about us is sort of geared in that way. So we have a whole host of human factors that get in the way of us just doing what we've been told to do. So you could instruct us around the skill, and you could instruct us around the knowledge of what to do, but you can't tell us how to feel and then you know, how them feelings are going to manifest themselves in our behaviour. So just want to
That's
say that.
true. Yeah, it's all about the triangle of the human being, how
Yeah.
thoughts and feelings and existing behaviours, habits. Ian, I've got you in a minute. It was Steve first. Neil, fabulous.
Yeah, I was just kind of thinking back to a conversation I remember having before I sort of started coaching and moving in a different way, and it was about, really simply, about mirror checks again. And they were all perfect, and it was all apart from that right side mirror whenever we were doing anything. And it all boiled down to the fact that he was doing it and then completely stopped because he'd never seen anybody there when he'd looked. So there was no benefit. And I think it's about creating, with all of these things, it's about creating, talking about the action and creating the consequence, basically. So trying to find that link to put it together. So I think it's got to be in the way that you phrase it. So rather than saying you need to check that mirror, it's got to be asking what could be there. Could it be, you know, tell me something. So you've got to give them some context.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what you're getting is just a repeat, and it's just parrot fashion, and it will stop. The minute they haven't got an instructor sitting in their ear or going, check your right mirror, it's just gonna stop. Which is why most of us, when we went and did our part 2, the thing we got picked up on the most was probably mirror check. Because you kind of stop those things. I know I did completely.
Well, following on from what you're saying, Steve, I think it's the motivation. I think we have a different motivation. And in fact, the motivation changes when we become, or we start that process of becoming an ADI, where our motivation is, I've got to show the person sitting in the passenger seat now that I'm going to be the perfect ADI when I do finally pass it. So I'm making sure I tell them. So it's this, you know, passing things on, this tell thing. But it's finding the motivation. And I think that's where, that's what our key is. We need to, for something like mirror work, and you've nailed it, the motivation comes from the individual. And we as ADIs, or we as drivers before that, for anything like mirror work or anything additional that we choose to do, is because we're motivated to do it. And usually that's because of our history and our what's happened to us, our awareness of our problems and the limitations we have of driving. So I agree with what you're saying, Steve. Ian's next, but I just want to say hi, Neil. Thanks for muting your microphone. If you do want, you've got to unmute your microphone if you want to talk. It's on the left. I'll do it.
Sorry, I muted it.
He might be doing it at the same time. Neil, I've just unmuted you and you might have gone. Oh. Well, he's got to do it. Right, he hasn't. All right, Ian, save me from the traumas of Facebook, please.
All right. Basically, I always think about the, like, you know, telling them what you're doing. Is it promoting a very test-focused sort of training style as well? So we're focusing very much about this is what you need to do to pass your test.
Yeah.
Not allowing someone to sort of explore things that in their own way, and then I think Sammy said about like producing robots, they only know how to pass the test. So when something does occur, they haven't got the skill set in place to use, you know, maybe have not improving that skill set to help people sort of mentally deal with the things that occur after test. But then very much about you know, focusing about test focus. I think obviously we're trying to fall away from that.
Yeah, I agree. We're still focused on the test. It's so hard to get away from that. It is so hard to away from that. Neil, glad you found your unmute button.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Welcome. I'm glad you got here. Neil, everybody hadn't really thought much about this, so it's Neil's first time coming on. But anytime you want to say something, Neil, if you just put your hand up,
Okay,
I will see you, and then I'll do a thumbs up once I've seen you, and then I'll come and call on you. Do you want
Okay,
to
so
say anything now?
No, it's like being at school again. No, it's fine.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's just
That's
really
okay.
hard because, yeah, it's really
That's
hard.
fine, no
Otherwise,
worries.
we all talk over each other as we're doing right now.
Okay then.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Neil. And
Cheers.
then most of the time, if you could mute yourself again, and then just when you want to talk, say something. Terry, it was Terry next.
Fiona, quickly, there's one of the attendees wants to say something. Just so you know.
Brilliant.
Yeah, after Terry, that'd be fun. And I think Eric wants to say something. He's raised his hand.
Fabulous. Fabulous. I love that. Terry, I didn't know we had any. I didn't know we had any.
Morning, everyone. I think this is one of the big differences between coaching and instruction. Listen to me and do as I say is trying to condition behaviour. It's going back to Pavlov's dogs, and if we're interested and determined to change post-test driving stats in terms of KSIs, conditioning just doesn't work. You can't tell someone how to do something, because as Steve alluded to, once you're not there anymore, they'll find their own way. They'll go through that expressive phase that Fiona talks about. And listen to me. Do as I say. It's easier in a lot of ways rather than coaching. It's a lot of things that people fall back into because coaching doesn't work. So I'll just tell them what to do anyway. But it's about the conditioning. We can't condition people to behave. We can't dangle that carrot of do this to pass your test, check your mirrors, they won't pass your test, because it just doesn't work long term. You might get them through the test, but again, it goes back to what Ian was saying about post-test training. But we can't condition people to behave or do what we want them to do. We have to let them find their own way, and you're there to make sure they find their own way safely.
Perfect. Thanks, Terry. Spot on as always. And it links to what Steve was saying just a few minutes ago. All of us, we've been conditioned to pass our tests looking at the mirrors. Now do this, now do that. We were all conditioned. What did you do? What did I do? As soon as I passed my test, I stopped doing them because I was told to do them. I didn't do it. But again, it's that motivation to do it, the motivation to change my behavior and do my mirrors more regularly or at the right times was it was down to me and what I wanted to do for a living. So the motivation, the fact that we're not robots and we don't do what someone tells us to. No, thanks, Terry. It links really nicely to what Steve was saying. Wonderful. Kev, you said something of something.
Yeah, it's also, I've answered the question, so it's fine. Eric was just having problems with the connection, so hopefully he's going to log out, log back in again, and sort it out.
Oh, I thought it was actual. I'm looking forward to attendees, guys. Do put questions. The other guys can see what you're writing. I won't be able to interact with the world that easily. But the whole point of changing to the webinar style is you can have attendees that come in and you kind of sit in the audience. You don't have to be a panelist and be seen on the screen. So you're kind of anonymous if that's what you want to be. You don't have to worry about the live feed cutting out, which is frustrating. And people are writing to me saying, you know, I want to do it. It's really annoying. The live feed keeps cutting out. So I figured let's go for the webinar style, get more people to just sit in the background, but then have the chance to say something and be anonymous with it. It is terrifying. I don't know how I do this. I don't know how everyone else does it as well. I just find this really scary. I do it anyway. The webinar thing, you know, no one's told us what to do. The first time any of us have seen a webinar was from the inside out. So I really am winging it. Kev, have you got anything else to say?
No, I'm going to pose a question though.
Oh, go on then.
Because it's something that I get told quite a lot from ADYs. It's so much easier to tell them what to do though, isn't it? What's everyone else's thoughts on that one?
I agree. It is.
Yeah, it is much easier.
Yeah.
That was a sweet answer.
Yeah, is anyone, because I think what Kev was trying to get, oh, Terry, are you going to speak? You're unmuted.
No, I haven't muted yet. Hang on. Yeah, actually, I am. It's also much easier to sit on your sofa all day than it is to go and get some exercise. So.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that's why, isn't that why we're called the Why Don't You series? Why don't you? Anyway, carry on. Sammy, I think you wanted to say something, and Phil.
That's it. What you were saying about, it's so much easier to just tell them, is that when I've been training PDIs, that's what is the main problem, is that they can't stop telling. And I think it's very difficult at that stage of learning, if that's something that's already been ingrained in you, to stop doing. So I would put this out as a question on behalf of everybody, to ask all of the experts or anybody who's had more experience of this, is how do you stop yourself telling when it is such an ingrained habit?
So true, so true. How do you stop it? It's a shame, Neil, as in
Hello.
gonna get confused with my Neils now.
Yep.
Because you Neil Whiteman.
Oh, sorry.
Because you have your PDI.
Yeah.
And I wish he was here, Ian with 2 eyes, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because he actually delivered 1 driver training session before lockdown.
Yeah.
But I would love to have asked him his thoughts on. It would have been really good, wouldn't it? Being in that habit of telling, just following on from what Sammy said.
Yeah, it would have been. I mean, he's really, really open to the coaching style, though. It's been so easy to teach him, to be quite honest, because of how open he's seen the coaching style. He knows nothing else. He knows no PSTs or anything like that. So it's a lot easier to teach somebody like that.
Yeah.
And I found it a lot easier to do as well, to be quite honest, through coaching.
Yeah. And surely training the PDIs that way as well. Who was it? I've forgotten. Was it Neil or Steve? Oh, Phil. Yeah, Neil H. Yes, please.
So people with foreign languages, sometimes you have to tell them. They're very difficult to actually coach.
True. Absolutely spot on, Neil. Yeah, that's a really good point. Really good point. I've just noticed Q&A. There's Q&A on my screen. I don't know if anyone's checking that out.
Keith.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. You're right, and I think it's that's when it goes to demo and all of the other things. But you're spot on, Neil. Thank you. Yeah, Phil for sure, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in answer to Kev's little point there, the danger is if people do start just telling them what to do, you tell them the way you put it is always exactly the same, because that's what we would get comfortable with, and it wouldn't necessarily make sense or be any worth to the pupil. So telling them is not really an option as such.
Well, it's not really an option to us anymore. I spent a long time doing it. Yeah, I did spend a long time doing it, and it's actually quite scary not telling. I think I find that scary. Ian Larry.
I think we're saying about not telling everyone. I think there's some things that are the skill things that you can say. If a car's never driven a car before, I personally don't think there's any harm in telling them how to set the gas, find the bike, because and as long as you're not continuing telling them, but little skill things, I don't think there's an issue with, as long as you're then carrying on, then going back into thoughts and feelings coaching after that, because you could spend weeks if you're trying to get them to understand, like, what's the bike point feel like, etc., etc. I think sometimes you're allowed to help them and tell them that. I think we're talking more about a continual coaching of just do this, just do this, do this. But I think at certain times it's a good tool to have, is just to tell them something to help them with a skill, not necessarily a thoughts and feelings approach or anything like that, but just to help them along. I don't know, maybe not.
Yes, I totally agree. I can see where you're coming from with that. There is a lot of value in just say it if it's a simple thing. Absolutely. Di?
Yeah, thanks, Diana. I think it comes down to who does it benefit the most, you know, because we are fixers, we're born fixers. We know the answers, and it is absolutely much easier to tell somebody the right way of doing something than to give them time to work it out themselves. I mean, a simple example would be something like stalling. You know, as an instructor, we have three options. We can either prevent them from stalling in the first place, yeah, by actually stopping the clutch from coming up too quickly, or we can allow them to do it and then go through the core comps and then tell them how to do it and talk them through it. Or we can actually believe they've got a little bit of sense, you know, and say, what's just happened? What do you think caused that? What are you going to do differently? Who does that benefit the most? Which of those methods actually benefits this pupil the most? And it has to be them working it out. You know, so for me, when I started to coach and do client-centered learning, it actually made me feel as though I've been doing a disservice to my pupils for a very, very long time, because they weren't getting the benefit of actually finding out for themselves. And of course, there is a place for telling, and that's just to keep the car safe. That's it, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, Sammy's doing thumbs up, and a lot of us are thinking about that. Ian Larry, sorry. You're right.
Yeah, Di kind of just said at the end, I think that, you know, you said about stalling, and I agree, it's about keeping the car safe, so you're not going to let them think about what went wrong and try to figure it out themselves at the head of a traffic light when you've got 26 things behind you. You know, at that point, you've got to say, do this, do that, then go into the coaching and allow them to figure it out later on. I think we've got to be really careful that people aren't going to see this, oh, I'll just sit at some lights and let them figure it out themselves. I think you've got to really make sure you're doing it in the right place at the right time for the right people. So what suits them best and what suits you. That's it, really.
Yeah.
The end anyway.
Yeah. It's weird how people can agree on things and yet seem to disagree. It's one of those. It's a really important thing. There is value to it. The thing I noticed was when I used to tell, and this came up in one of our previous Why Don't Use. When I used to tell, and explain a maneuver, get back in the car next week to practice the same maneuver. What do you remember? Well, I don't know. I can't remember when to do this thing or that thing that you told me. And there was the barrier to the learning process where when someone self-directs themselves, however they want to do it, whether it's talking it out, writing it out, when it's the self-learning or when the learning comes from within, it's instant, permanent, and it's just a different kind of learning, just different.
Do you want me to read question and answers?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hopefully you can still hear me. Keith Layton, I find it easier to show them. And Keith Summers has mentioned MSPSL is 5 items to remember. What is the trick to get them to remember? Is it in the correct order? So getting them to do it in the correct order.
Okay, one of those first. Take the first one. Di, I'm unleashing Di.
Yeah.
Thanks, Fiona. MSPSL. I just have one question, really. You know, before we all became driving instructors, which was probably the first time we ever heard of MSPSL, how on earth did we get round corners? If you have somebody who has a problem, maybe they're dyslexic or dyspraxic, are they actually likely to remember those letters anyway? And would they be in the right order anyway? So wouldn't it be better to sit somebody by a junction and just say, right, we're going to get round this corner in a moment. Can you list the risk factors? And what order would you put those risk factors into? Tell me how you're going to get round that corner. Once they've done it a couple of times, then you can start to put it into, you know, have a conversation with them about how to put it in the right order. But letters mean nothing. You know, even if they can remember the letters in the right order, they don't always remember what they stand for. So what's the point?
Yes, I agree. I'm rubbish with those. I spend most of my time. SEDS, as an example. Some of us know what SEDS stands for, and I spend ages running around trying to remember what the different letters stand for. I can make all sorts of things up. All sorts of things. D might stand for no. Anyway, it was Terry and then Steve. It was Terry marginally before Steve. But thanks, Di.
I've got another question on the other one when you're ready.
Yeah. Terry.
2 points. Just going back to Ian's comments about what's wrong with this, telling them where the biting point is and all that. That's fine, but I would always let them have a go first. You know, have a play. What do you notice? Why is the car feel like that now? What point do you think that is? So yeah, if not getting it, then fine, tell them. But I'd always let them have a play first. Let them find out for themselves first. Ian's nodding, so he agrees. And secondly, acronyms. Acronyms. MSPSL. I've not used MSPSL for 8 years now, 9 years now. Can all my learners get around the corner safely? Absolutely. Do they do MSPSL? Yes, they do. Do they know it's called MSPSL? No, probably not. And I agree with Di. They get in the way. MSPSL, they've first of all got to remember the order of MSPSL. Then they've got to remember what the M stands for and the S stands for. And then they've got to focus on what they've got to do and then work it all out in their head. And then they've got to do it. And by that time, the junction's 15 meters past you. And so what I find is MSPSL, all those kind of acronyms, they get in the way of learning because they cause confusion. Just get me around this corner safely. What have you, like Di said, what have you got to do to get around safely? And just leave it with them to learn, to understand what order they go in. Because there's nothing else to remember. There's nothing to remember. I've got to do this because I know the consequences are. I've got to do this because. I've got to do this because. And there's 5 steps there.
But the learning is then about the ADI, and not the learner, and not the learning. It's not specific enough. It's then the learner is trying to make us happy, please us, rather than just get on with the hardest bit, which is learning is safe. Steve, I presume what you're going to say is related to what we were just talking about. Yep, brilliant.
Just what Terry and Di said. I mean, I think anyone that comes to me would be, or still learning with me, would be hard pushed to even know what MSPSL is. Like Terry said, you're firing information at somebody, and their main concern is actually steering round a corner without hurting anybody, themselves, the car, or anybody standing around that corner. And I think especially on those early lessons as well, it's too much information. It's just so, like as Terry said, they're too busy trying to remember what each individual letter stands for. And by that time, you've either gone past the turning, you've gone up the curb on the other side of the turning, or panic has just set in because they're too busy trying to remember these things. I think it does have its place. I think occasionally there are some people that I've worked with that need kind of that trigger, and it helped them. But I think for the majority of people, I just think it's not a necessary thing. If you ask somebody how they cross a road, they don't just walk without looking. You know, if you refer it back to something that makes more sense rather than MSPSL, it's going to be a lot more helpful to give them something they can already link it to that they do. So
experiential learning, fabulous. Thanks, Steve. Kev, I need you to know whether we get Di to talk first or the point you were going to make ages ago.
I think Keith's just saying that sometimes swapping roles and seats helps them make them what they have to think about rather than being in front of the wheel.
Taking the pressure off. Totally agree. So it's taking the pressure off. And again, a lot of these things are, we're all on the same page and we all agree. the thing is, when we have a conversation like this, or when someone has one sentence to say, we make judgments about what people mean by that, and there isn't enough conversation. So sometimes, guys, please bear with us. We do judge, we make automated assumptions about what you're writing, and we don't mean to do it. And I think that was what was happening a little bit with Ian when Ian Lowry was talking. I think he had one thought in his head, was conveying a message, and I think some of us understood something else by what he was saying. And then I'm just glad when we can clarify things. Yeah, I agree. And it's giving somebody, but again, it's saying, would it help you, or do you want to watch, or how can you help yourself get this better? Thanks, Kev. Di?
Yeah, coming back to these acronyms again, you know, I think they are far more beneficial for the instructor than they are for the people, because there are several things that an instructor has to do, like talk somebody through something, or they have to watch the people and make sure that things are done in a safe, you know, order. So it's quite, I think it's more beneficial really for the instructor to know MSPSL and POM and LADA and all the rest of them than it is for people, because, you know, otherwise it's just a bunch of bloody letters, you know. That's a
Yeah. No, we always laugh at Fiona and the acronyms and mnemonics, whatever you want to call them. I've actually had people explaining to me how to tell the difference between an acronym and a mnemonic, and still I can't, my brain doesn't cope.
At least you can say it.
So is that Sammy waving to me, or is that Sammy waving to, right, okay. Any questions, Kev, from the attendees?
All done.
All done.
Up to date.
Anyone else? Anyone else want to say something? Anyone else want to bring? What was it? Why don't you do? What was the top? I can't read it.
Listen to me and do as I say.
Yeah, listen to me and do as I say. And I think that's it. Do we get, Lee, just 1 second. Do we get frustrated when we do not feel listened to? And I do. I worked very hard on my listening skills for a lot of years, and it's changed. So when people don't listen to me in the way I want them to, I find that very difficult. And I think I used to find that. It's like, well, I'm telling you everything you need to know. You can't be bothered to listen. It's what it felt like. I don't think that's actually the legitimate, or that's not the real situation. People just can't. People just can't take it in. Di was saying about people can probably take in 30% of what you say. And if you think about this, if you actually ask people who were interested in what you guys were talking about in the webinar, you ask them how much they actually remember of what we speak about, probably hardly anything. There'll be specific things that people, and that's why I get Kev to do the recap. That's why Kev is so good at the recap, because he knows the value of it. And I'm just standing here talking nonsense. Lee.
Sorry, camera's just falling on.
There's always an excuse. It's the dog, it's the cat. There's just always an excuse.
Today. Not behaved himself. So I was just thinking last night about going back to my driving lessons and learning to drive. My instructor was a great guy, and my lessons were enjoyable. But thinking about it, I think in the end I learned more about him than he did about me, and it should really about me learning about me and him learning about me, if that makes sense to everyone. I know what people's thoughts were, because, you know, in the end I remember getting my first car, and then there was a lot of me finding out about me. Yeah, when I got my first car, it was, you know, it was a controlled environment. He was a lovely guy, great, you know, in terms of the lessons that we did, but I don't think he learned a lot about me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have to totally agree. One of the things that I'm thinking about when you said that was, my first driving lesson, I'm going to try and do a potted version of this. I can remember getting a wonderful briefing on reversing round a corner. And he said to me, and just keep the curb, something, something, something in the quarter light.
Yeah.
Looking around, quarter light, I can't see any light. There's the middle one, but that's not, you know, and he's talking about this quarter light. 10 years later, I find out that the quarter light is that little flappy window that you used to have in the back of a car. 10 years. And the reason I remember that was because he said to me, do you understand? You know what I mean? So he was giving me a wonderful reference point. And in that moment, and you know, memory is only stored because of usually an intense emotional reaction. So the intense emotional reaction was, be honest, tell him you have no idea where this light is. And I made the decision not to say anything. And I was so uncomfortable. And I thought, well, it's okay. I'll do it wrong. I'll reverse around the corner. When it goes wrong, he will explain to me again where this light is. And I can say, oh, there's the light. I reversed around the corner. His briefing meant nothing because I could reverse around the corner. I was just effectively having a go. And then 12 billion years later, when I become an ADI, no, that didn't make sense then, but after and during my BTEC 4 course, and I suddenly went boom, 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 and all of those connections made sense. And the quarter light conversation. 10 years standing in my kitchen, I found out about that. Epoxy quarter light. Thanks, Lee, for bringing that up. Phil and Sammy, and I don't know who was first. Sammy did really nice and close to the screen. Thanks, Lee. Sammy, can I get you to go first, and then Phil?
Yeah, I was just coming on to what you said. The word connections actually connected something in my brain is from what I was saying at the beginning, that is if you take away that freedom of choosing your own words, your own learning and everything else, is that you are removing the chance of those connections being made. So the fact that you said the word connections actually connected me to that thought, which proves that we need to explore all connections.
Yeah, that's how memories are formed. It is the connections, neurons linked to neurons. Again, that links back to, oh, I don't remember who said it. Do you know what? I suddenly realised how visual I am, because when the boxes move around on the screen, you know, the videos sometimes move around on the screen. I then can't remember who said what, because I'm associating it with a person, but I look to the place where that person is now. Di's sitting there, and I know Di didn't say it. It could have been Lee. It's about the way memories are formed, and it is making the connections. Thanks, Sammy. Phil?
Yeah, I don't know if anybody's watching the Facebook live feed, but someone called Sarah put on, these are all very valid points with regard to MSPSL. Safety is top priority. During the SC, would you mention the acronym? I do think the examiner would expect to see this.
Ooh.
Also, just as an extra little point, there's somebody called Ray Seagrave watching. I don't know who he is. It's good to see him.
I have no idea either. Hi, Ray. Hi, whoever brought up, who was that, Phil, that mentioned that?
Sarah Moore.
About the SC? Sorry?
Sarah Moore.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. I'm going to put it out to the panel. Who wants to speak first about the SC and mentioning and whether we need to or not? Di?
I'll let Di go first.
Kev, Di. Well, one of you first.
Okay. My opinion, and it is only my opinion, there is only three things that the examiner is actually looking for. Is the instructor keeping the car safe? Is learning taking place? And are they delivering value for money? How they do that will depend on the situation. If the pupil, as it was mentioned before, if the pupil needs MSPSL and the instructor doesn't give MSPSL, then yes, they'd be marked down for it. But if that student didn't need MSPSL and it was forced upon them, they'd also get picked up for it. So it's looking at the situation and deciding, is it necessary? Would it be helpful? Is that going to actually help them to learn what they need to learn or not? So it's not a yes or a no. It's depending on the situation, but always keep those three things in focus. Value for money, keeping the car safe, and is learning taking place. That's it.
Totally agree. And it is the very specific kind of brain that responds well to a mnemonic or an acronym. Yeah, it's a very specific kind of brain. If you've got one of those, then fabulous, because life is just a series of patterns and strategies to follow. It works really well if it works for you. It wouldn't work for me. Kev?
Yeah, I just use the word relevant to me. That's what I use. Is it relevant to the lesson? Do they need it? If it's not part of what we're doing, and they're doing most of it anyway, you know, you might bring it up later, but is it relevant to the lesson?
Or could I say then, thanks Steve, I'll come to you in a sec, could it be relevant to the person as well, Kev? So is the word relevant to the lesson, or do you mean the goal?
Yeah.
Yeah, so relevant to the lesson, the goal, or relevant to the person. And I think that kind of links with what Di's saying, I hope.
Definitely, because you'll tell me off otherwise.
Well, only afterwards. You know, I don't know what I'd do if I couldn't bully you on these. I really don't. Thank you. Sandy's off screen. I hope she's all right. Steve.
Yeah, just as Kev said, just about MSPSL. I mean, is it necessary? Just being on your SC and barking out MSPCL, I can't even say it, look. Just because you think that's what the examiner might want to hear, at the wrong time, that's going to cause more harm than good, because all of a sudden the learners, especially if it's not something you use a lot as well, if it's something you've never used, suddenly on your SC is not the time to be barking that at your learner, who then on a roundabout suddenly turns around and looks at you. I think it's really hard to get into the kind of performance idea for an SC, isn't it? So I'm going to do all of these things that I used to do when I had my colour file on my lap. So that's just kind of my take on it. I think if it's like you said, certain kind of brains react well to these mnemonics. Certain brains don't. If it's not something you regularly use, why would you choose the day of your standards check to be the first time that you think, do you know what, I'll start using that today? That sounds like a great idea. And that's speaking from experience, as I think Di heard this story of me actually doing this to somebody on a roundabout during my SC. So I have actually been there and seen the result of it. So that's my thoughts on that point.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I think you're right. Absolutely right. Lee?
Yeah, it's just following on from Steve that I think the minute you look at what you're delivering and think that it's centered around the SE, it's the minute you're getting it wrong. I think you want to look at what you're delivering and it wants to be client centered. Is it what the pupil needs? If you're doing it for the benefit of the SE in the back of the car, stop doing it. Don't do it. It's delivering something that's centered to the client and for the benefit of them. Simple.
Spot on. Totally agree. So those three things plus really making sure it's specific to the client. Nice. Neil W, you haven't said anything for ages. Is that because you're just not saying anything for ages?
No, just listening and taking in what people are saying at the minute. Terry's dying to say something though.
Yeah. I've got it. He's saving you. Go on, Terry.
Yeah, everyone, Neil. I have a confession to make. I've actually forgotten. I have used MSPSL for the last 2 years, and it was maybe 2 or 3 times, and we called it a recipe because both the people liked cooking, and I let them use the words they wanted to use in their recipe to get round the corner safely. And I'd forgotten about that. I think Lee just reminded me, or was it Steve? Can't remember. So it has been used. So I apologise. I lied live on Facebook.
Yes, I've done that too, Terry. There was somebody who really enjoyed using expletives during his sessions. His choice. And he actually wrote a mnemonic a mnemonic, an acronym. Anyway, he broke down the letters of one of his favourite words to know what to do on approach to roundabout. I have written an article on a Facebook post. I have written that on it, but it worked. But we could also use the expletive of, we could use it and it turned the session into a lot of fun, because we could say, okay, how are you going to make this next junction? That last junction was proper, because so it worked for him. The next lesson we were chatting about it, and I said, so the expletive, I remember the expletive and what the letters were in it, but do you remember what it stood for? And neither of us could remember. But the principle of the learning took place, not because of, but it was a sort of a reversed inside out version of using an acronym or a mnemonic. Go on.
I'm just saying that's all to do with being client-centered and working with how they want to do stuff. We don't have to keep to our way of doing things, because that's how we were taught. It's whatever works for the client. And that's just a perfect example.
Well, yeah. Sometimes I think, oh, I've just said that out loud on Facebook. You know,
It's okay. I'll lie on Facebook.
I've done something wrong. Am I going to get an email from the DVSA? You do what? You don't see that on a, yeah. Has anyone else got anything to say? Yeah, quickly. Thanks, Steve.
5 to 12, just to let you know.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Steve.
Building on what you're saying, I think, you know, a well-placed F-bomb in the middle of a lesson can actually occasionally increase the experience depending on the person. So especially if something's gone particularly well, if depending on who you're with, if that's the language that they use, surely that's just part of your kind of mirroring, matching your rapport by using the same language is only increasing the experience. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it should be like a stag night or something, but you know, I think don't be too scared of the fact that unless, you know, you're sitting next to this little old lady or little old man who's been calling you Mr. or Mrs. for the last 12 hours, that the well-placed swear word every now and then is not a problem. I don't think I have a problem with that. Luckily, none of my learners do, because it happens more often than not. So
yeah. Thanks, Steve. Just as a point to note, it wasn't the F1 that was used. It's very hard to do an MSN kind of or an MSPSL Ipscolada with the F1. It was a different word. Kev.
What?
Kev, can you do your wonderful summary, or just give me a heads up on what's going on with the rest of Facebook?
We got no questions or anything, so we're all good. I think I can remember the summary just about.
Please do.
From the notes that I've written. So Sammy started off by saying we don't produce robots because, you know, in driver it's all about post-test crashes if they haven't been taught in client-centered way, and can only remember so much information was from Di. Neil mentioned outside influences, parents and peers that can have an effect on what they're thinking and feeling. Phil mentioned about rapport. The pupil needs to be engaged, and this is noticing their learning styles. Human factors, you can instruct the skills, but you can't tell them how to think and feel. That was come from Lee. If you can't see the benefit, they're unlikely to do it. So consequences, Steve mentioned that, and then you put in about find the motivation for them to learn. And then I asked the question, is it easier to, it's easier to tell them? Neil H said, well, sometimes you have to tell foreign students because of the language barrier. Di mentioned the free options to let them have a go and tell them, or just talk through. Then we mentioned MSPSL, park up and just ask about the risk factors of getting around that corner. That came from Di. Acronyms, They can get in the way of learning. That was from Terry and Steve. They both mentioned the same sort of thing. Acronyms normally benefit the instructor more because it's something for them to follow. Recognise your listening skills when we're doing stuff. That came from Fiona. And Lee mentioned it tells more about the instructor, or he learnt more about his instructor than he did about himself, or the instructor learnt more about him. Connections, Sammy mentioned about connections and how it all goes back to how we connect can actually help the learning. And got onto a little bit of standards check. And on your standards check, we only have to do three things really, which was give value for money, make sure learning takes place and keep everyone safe. So, you know, you don't really need the acronym unless it's not relevant. And yourself and Terry, you do use acronyms, but it comes from the student. Terry mentioned about the pupil's recipe for making sure it comes from them to get round the corner, things they do. And my personal thoughts about the session today was learning comes from within. So if people are going to learn, it needs to come from them and not us. And that will help with the process going forward when we're not there.
Spot on, love it.
No, and
Well
that's me
done.
finished.
Yeah, well, you're good at it. There's a reason why you're doing that. It's because you do have a skill. You do have a skill. Thank you.
Have a skill, did you say?
Well, squirrel. So it's just moving on. What I would say is we're going to continue. I think I will talk to the team here. I think we're going to continue with the webinar aspect. Please share it. Please invite people to attend. I'm going to try and make it easy. And I think, let me know, send me a PM if you want to be involved in the next one when we choose what it is. I'm going to stop the Facebook live feed in a minute. You guys that are panelists, please hang around because we need to come together to formulate what we're going to have as a topic, or I can just talk to the core five. The Terry, Kev, Neil and Sammy. But we're going to try and choose it because otherwise it would just go on and on. If I ask too many people, we never finalise a subject. Going to stop the Facebook Live. Please click on the links of webinars. Please share it because I think it's one of those things. It's just good fun. Get your mates on. It's fun being a panelist, I think. We've got a couple of new people, so do hang around. I'm going to end the Facebook Live. It's next what day is it? Friday. Friday at 11. I don't know what the date is on Friday. Can anyone work it out?
24th.
24th. Friday the 24th at 11. Same place. So find out the link, share it, click it, get your place if you want to be a webinar member, or if you just want to be an attendee at the webinar itself, or watch on Facebook Live. Thank you, guys. I shall see you on Facebook another day. Stop live stream. Thanks, guys.
I'll see you soon.